So picking up where we left off at, we have our final answer would be 8 1/4 pounds. And that would be how much meat that Sue bought. Okay, now, number 2, it says fraction of a quantity. There are 36 cookies in a package. Jim ate 4/9 of the cookies. What fraction of the cookies are left? Okay, if Jim ate 4/9 of the cookies, then we know that 5/9 have to remain. Because remember, all of the cookies would be 9/9 as a fraction. And we would have to subtract off 4/9, which would give us 5/9. Okay, so that is the fraction of the cookies that are left. Now, we want to know how many cookies are left. So, we would take the 36 cookies, that was the total amount, and multiply by the 5/9, which is the volume that was left. So, we'll put the 36 over 1, and we could do some simplifying before we multiply. 36 and 9 both has 9 in common. 9 goes into 36 4 times. 9 goes into 9 once. So our new fractions would be 4 over 1 times 5 over 1, which would give us 20 over 1, which would give us 20. So it would be 20 cookies that are left. Now, we go here to number 3, fraction of a quantity. An employee spends 3/4 of her time in production. 1/3 of her remaining time is spent doing paperwork. What fraction of her total time is spent on paperwork? Okay, so now we have 3/4, so the total amount of time she has is 4/4. She spent 3/4 of that time in production. So we could subtract off 3/4. So that would leave 1/4 time left. Now, they said that she spent 1/3 of that time. So we would take 1/4 times 1/3 because it's 1/3 of that time. What she has left is 1/12. That's the fraction of her time that's spent on paperwork. It's 1/12. Okay, now we go here to number 4. It says area of a rectangle. The area of a rectangle is found multiplying the length and width. A equals L times W. Find the area of the rectangle shown below. So, what we would do is this. Remember, is area is equal to the length. The length is 5 1/3 feet. And the width is 1 1/8 feet. Now remember, we have to change these mixed numbers to improper fractions. So this will give us 16 over 3 feet. And this will give us 9 over 8 feet. And just in case you forgot, remember when you're changing mixed numbers to improper fractions, the denominator stays the same. And you would take the whole number times the denominator plus the numerator. 5 times 3 is 15 plus 1 is 16. 1 times 8 is 8 plus 1 is 9. Now we can simplify before we multiply. 16 and 8 both has 8 in common. 8 goes into 8 once. 8 goes into 16 twice. And then 3 and 9 has 3 in common. 3 goes into 3 once. 3 goes into 9 3 times. So your new fractions would be 2 over 1 times 3 over 1, which would just give us 6. And then feet times feet is feet squared. So it'd be, the area would be 6 square feet. Now, we move on to section D, dividing fractions. It says to divide fractions, multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. So now, first of all, let's take a look here. A negative divided by a negative is positive. So we know our final answer is going to be positive. So what we would do when we're dividing fractions, the first fraction remains the same. I just didn't write the negative because we know our final answer is going to be positive. So the first fraction remains the same. Division becomes multiplication. And we would take the reciprocal or flip the second fraction. Now we can simplify before we multiply. 7 and 7 both have 7 in common. So 7 goes into 7 once. 7 goes into 7 once. 8 and 10 both has 2 in common. 2 goes into 8 4 times. 2 goes into 10 5 times. So our new fractions would be 1/4 times 5 over 1. 1 times 5 is 5. 4 times 1 is 4. Now, since we didn't start with a mixed number, or we were not asked to write this as a mixed number, and if your teacher didn't tell you to write as a mixed number, it'd just be 5/4. But if your teacher did tell you to write as a mixed number, let me just show it to you. You would take 4 into 5. 4 goes into 5 one time, and we will have a remainder of 1. So our answer would be 1 1/4. That's if you have to write it as a mixed number. Now we come here. Again, we have a positive divided by a positive, so we know it's positive. The first fraction remains the same. Division becomes multiplication. And remember, this 6 is really 6 over 1. So if we take the reciprocal, it'll be 1 over 6. Now we can simplify before we multiply. We could divide 2 into 4 and 6. 2 goes into 4 twice. 2 goes into 6 3 times. So this would be 2/5 times 1/3. 2 times 1 is 2, and 5 times 3 is 15. So this would be your final answer. Now we go here. We have a positive divided by a negative. So we know our final answer is going to be negative. So we'll write it here. Now we would change these mixed numbers to improper fractions. So then this would be 18 over 5. Divided by, this would be 12 over 5. Now remember, since this all is going to be negative, I put the negative here so I don't have to write it throughout the problem, just when I give the final answer. Now, this first fraction will remain the same. Division will become multiplication, and you will take the reciprocal or flip that second fraction. So now we can simplify before we multiply. 5 goes into 5 once, 5 goes into 5 once. 6 goes into 18 3 times, and 6 goes into 12 twice. So it'll be 3 over 1 times 1 over 2. So then this will give us 3/2. Now remember, since we started with a mixed number, we need to write this as a mixed number. So we'll go 2 into 3. 2 goes into 3 one time, and we'll have a remainder of 1. So our final answer would be 1 1/2. But remember, it was negative, so it's a negative 1 1/2. And that is our final answer. Now we come here, and we have a fraction over a fraction. Now when you have a fraction over a fraction, that just means this here. Be 7/12 divided by 5/18. Nothing special. So we would keep the first fraction the same. Division would become multiplication, and we'll take the reciprocal of the second fraction. Now, the only thing that we have in common that we could simplify before we multiply is with the 12 and 18. They both have 6 in common. So 6 goes into 12 twice. 6 goes into 18 3 times. So we have 7/2 times 3/5. So this will give us 21 over 10. Now we cannot simplify this. So now again, we did not start with mixed numbers, and the directions didn't tell us to write it as a mixed number, but your instructor may have told you to. So I'm going to write the mixed number here, but if not, you can leave it as 21 over 10. So we could take 10 into 21. 10 goes into 21 twice, and we will have a remainder of 1. So now our whole number would be 2, and our fraction would be 1/10. So it could be this here, or it could be this here as your final answer. Now, go on to the next page. Okay, so we have section E, application of fraction division. It said Bob has 5.5 pounds of hamburger. How many quarter-pound hamburgers can he make? Now, first of all, we need to know what a quarter pound is, or a quarter is. So that'll be 1/4. and it's 1/4 pound. So they're saying let's take 5.5 pounds and divide it by 1/4 pound to see how many hamburgers can be made. Okay, so 5.5 rewritten as an improper fraction will give us 11/2. Division, we had divided by 1/4. So we have 11/2 times the reciprocal of 1/4 is 4/1. Now we could simplify across before we multiply. We could divide 2 into both of these values. 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 4 twice. So we have 11/1 times 2/1, which is 22/1, which is 22. So this person can make 22 quarter-pound hamburgers. That's a lot of hamburgers. All right, now we go here to number 2. It says Jane's lawn covers 2/3 of an acre. It takes her 4 hours to mow the lawn. How many acres does she mow each hour? Okay, so now her lawn covers 2/3. We would take 2/3 divided by 4. So now we will add 2/3. Now remember this 4 is 4/1. Be multiplied by 1/4. So we could simplify before we multiply. 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 4 twice. So this would be 1/3 times 1/2, which would be 1/6. So it's 1/6 of an acre per hour. So that's how much that she mows each hour is 1/6 of an acre. Okay, now we go to section F, evaluating expressions. When working with fractions, it is a good idea to use parentheses around a fraction when you substitute it into an expression, just like we did in Unit 1. So now we have these problems. So we substitute in 2/3 for x, and we substitute in a negative 1/4 for y here. So now 2/3 in parentheses squared, that'll be the same as 2/3 times 2/3, which we know would be 4/9. And that'll be divided by a negative 1/4. Now we know a positive times a negative is going to give us a negative. So we know our final answer is going to be negative. So we have 4/9 times the reciprocal of 1/4 is 4/1. Okay, so now we'll multiply this because we cannot simplify here first. So we have 4 times 4 is 16, and 9 times 1 is 9. Since we were not asked to write this as a mixed number, it didn't start as a mixed number, we could leave it as a negative 16/9. Now, we go here to number 2. So this is another substitution problem. We would substitute in 5/9 for y times 2 times, and then we'll substitute in 7/12 for x. Now this is all multiplication. So we could put this 2/1, and we could multiply 5 times 2 times 7, or we could do some simplifying before we multiply. Let me rewrite this so this will look a little bit neater. So this would be 2/1, and this would be, what's that, 7/12. Okay, now we can simplify before we multiply. 2 and 12, 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 12 6 times. And then there's nothing else we can simplify. So we can multiply across. 5 times 1 is 5 times 7 is 35. 9 times 1 is 9 times 6 is 54. And this is your final answer. Okay, now just in case you have an instructor that told you to write this as a mixed number, I wrote out the process here. 9 goes into 16 once. 1 times 9 is 9. 16 minus 9 gives you 7. So you have a remainder of 7. your final answer